Sri Lanka, the Paradise Island, and I wish good morning to North and South America, good afternoon to Europe, and good evening to rest of the world. It's evening in my part of the world, and let me warmly welcome all of you to the 5th virtual working group meeting. Our group mandate is targets, indicators, and milestones. And this is the 5th virtual meeting of this nature. We have had so far 4 meetings, as you know, with your active participation. We have had nearly 90 participants, and with your oral submissions, oral comments, as well as electronic submissions, we have made significant progress. During the last week, when we had the bureau meeting on behalf of our group and on behalf of my fellow co-facilitator Sylvia, I have briefed the bureau on the achievement or the progress we have made so far. The bureau is very satisfactory with the progress that we have made, and that is all your dedicated, hard, enthusiastic work. And thank you very much for your active participation, your dedication and enthusiasm. So we hope that to continue the same momentum, as we have been informed by the bureau, due to the prevailing pandemic in the world, it is unlikely that we could have our face-to-face meeting in this year. So it is very uncertain, and it's a sad story, but it is all beyond our control. So today's agenda, we have 3 hours. We have 4 agenda items, and most of the agenda items will be handled and facilitated by Sylvia. So as you see, so we have dedicated 1 hour each for 1 agenda item. So Sylvia will do a discussion on set of recommendation for a process to establish indicators and milestones for finalized targets. So as you know, we have made significant progress with regard to targets. It's a matter of wordings and words that we need to negotiate. So therefore, we need to identify what are the recommendations for a process to establish indicators and milestones. So Sylvia will talk in depth about those things. General comments, agreement on integration of the document as an outcome of the group. So we have to submit outcome document based on what we have achieved. So today's discussion also will revolve around the outcome document. So then agenda number 3 also, we have a dedicated 1 hour for the discussion on co-facilitators reflection on progress made on part 1 of virtual working group 1 mandate. So general comments, oral interventions, and what are the way forward. And then the last item, the final step, and our future strategy. So we have to keep in mind that we have to maintain the same momentum, although we are not going to have face-to-face meetings in the near future. So we have asked, on behalf of the group, I have asked from the bureau what would be our next strategy, because as we all know, IP4 and ICCM5 face-to-face meetings cannot be replaced by virtual meetings, because in virtual meetings it is not almost possible for negotiation. So therefore we all have a dilemma what we are going to do. So having said that, once again, thank you very much for your active participation, and please feel free to make comments, contribute actively, enthusiastically. So now I will hand over the floor to my fellow facilitator, fellow co-chair, our live wire, Sylvia. Sylvia, please take over the floor. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And indeed, we have a ambitious agenda ahead of us today, and hopefully we will get through it step by step and bring it to fruition of a sound outcome document that will reflect the work that all of you have put in during these meetings that we've had, and also in between these meetings in the preparation of your written submissions and in the deliberations that we have had. So we could move to the next slide. And this is just a reminder of our group mandate. This is the last time that we will be returning to this mandate, as it is the last meeting, as Wahira mentioned. And so we would be looking to develop an outcome document which is based on the specific mandate, the 2 tasks that we have been tasked to by the Bureau. So the first, as you well know, is the finalization of the target proposals that were set out in SciChem IP4/3, and also the development of a set of recommendations on the process forward to further elaboration of targets and establishment of indicators and milestones for the finalized targets. So as you know, there was a technical working group that was that developed the IP4/ document, and then we can the intent is to kind of build upon that and create an outcome document that shows the progress that we have made in this group. Next slide, please. So you've all received or you have seen the last time we met, we had a discussion on 3 different options on the way forward for the recommendations part of the group mandate. And from your written submissions, then we will base our discussion on that. And I'm sure most of you had the opportunity to reflect upon the submissions and also your own views in this regard. But these are the 12 electronic written submissions that we received. Next slide, please. So the first, what we would do is to discuss the content of the outcome document as it reflects on the second part of the mandate. So in regard to the set of recommendations for a process to establish indicators and milestones for finalized target recommendations. And as you recall, there were 3 different ideas that we discussed in our last meeting on the ways forward. One was the continued work of a policy expert group. Option 2 was combining this policy expert group work with a technical expert group that could work separately, more specifically on data issues and methodologies for indicator work. And then the third option was not working further on IP4 or ICC. Not working further on this work until we reach IP4 and or ICCM5. So, you know, we had discussions on these different options, and we have had written submissions. You know, I'm presuming that perhaps on reflection upon the information that you've heard from the Bureau, there might be some changes in our reflections on these 3 options, considering that we have heard, as Wahira mentioned, that the face-to-face meetings of IP4 and ICCM5 have currently been indefinitely postponed. Next slide, please. So this is the option 1, the policy expert group and the mandate. And I think what I will do is just open maybe perhaps under each option your general reflections on that. And then perhaps we can come to a determination of which of these options are more acceptable to the group as a whole. But perhaps first I will just open the floor for comments on the separate options. So the option 1 was for continuation of the work, very similar to the work that we have right now of the virtual working group, with the mandate to continue working on target formulations and to see how there would be also an ability to advance work on indicators, but to have kind of a process of working on indicators and then revisiting the targets and having an understanding whether the targets also would need adjustment as indicators are developed. And then after that work, making recommendations to IP4 and or ICCM5. So I'd like to open the floor now to hear any comments that you may have on option 1. Johanna, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for all the hard work that has been done here. And I think that really the co-facilitators are to be very warmly congratulated on what's been done with the help of the Secretariat. I'm not sure whether this is the right minute to make this observation. But having had the paper and a chance to look at it, I'm speaking, of course, on behalf of the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, which is an advocacy group, which we are concerned that a lot of the targets are really how targets, and they're not to achieve what targets. And that is because that's the way most of the strategic objectives are in fact formulated. So we think that it will be very difficult to turn these into indicators because they're process driven. Now, these are the targets we got from the expert group. We accept that fully. But we think there will need to be at some point a fairly fundamental look again at the strategic objectives which came out of the which were provided by the co-chairs of IP3, I believe. And that because the strategic objectives will need to be turned more into what's than into how's, which is what they are at the moment, there will need to be quite a lot of work on the targets too. And I just wanted to put that up front because our mandate was to finalize. And if what you're finalized targets, and if what you're finalizing comes from some not very satisfactory strategic objectives, you're going to have a problem in finalizing. So at least for GAP, for us, the strategic objectives remain open. They were not to be looked at by the virtual working group, so that's fine. It's not that we haven't done our work. We weren't allowed to do our work. And therefore, the whole target process will be quite complicated from here on in. And that is why we are somewhat uncomfortable with the idea that what we are doing in any of these three options is wordsmithing the target formulations. Because we think we have a deeper job to do still. We will have, I say this now simply because I want to put it on the table before we look at the three versions of how we would go about this. It does lead us to have a view as to which is the best option. But I'll stop there before pronouncing on policy on option one. So I hope that this was the right place to make this intervention. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And this is definitely the right place in the sense that this is our last chance to say what's on our mind. So I think that's very welcome, that comment. And I do think that that, of course, is a struggle in general for this group because, you know, there's been an attempt to focus to some extent the work to what is possible to do in a non-negotiation mode. And the Bureau has tried to give us such guidance, but obviously it's as you've relayed in your comment, it's almost impossible to have some movement in one area not reflecting upon the other parts that will be the ultimate indicator framework of the instrument. So what I would suggest right now is just so we can move forward on discussing the options is I would like to suggest, because we will be going into the second part of our meeting, that we make note that there is some concern in the group that you know, that the strategic objectives might need some work as well, and that I think when we get to the targets discussion in the second part of our well, it's the first part of our mandate, but we put it as a second part of a discussion. We can include this concern in our outcome document as something, as a message to be given to the Bureau, and which they should consider in delegating or in drafting further mandates or instructions on how to bring the work forward in this area. So I hope that makes sense as far as a solution. So can I invite others to comment on option one as well, please?
I see Matthias from Germany, EU and member states.
Thanks, Brenna, and thanks to the co-facilitators. I just can follow the code regulations that Jill made. Really good work done. We're very happy with it, even if there's still very much that needs to be discussed. Just to be brief, with regard to option one, it's not our favorite option, as we think there's a need for an iterative process, and also a process in parallel to work on targets once and in parallel on indicators. And that's the main reason why we would like to have or favor option two. Yeah, that's it. I think for the moment we will come to the details a bit later. Thank you for now.
I see you, Kay Williams.
Thank you very much. And good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everybody. Yeah, I too would like to thank the co-facilitators for all their hard work and the Secretariat. It's been really useful to see these documents and to actually have everything in one place. Specifically on option one, that is not our preferred option, but we can work with it. Our preferred option is option two. But just as a more general point, as everybody who's been involved in these groups is aware to date, we're very keen on progressing some of the indicator work. Regardless of whichever option is chosen, I just wanted to make you aware that we would be very happy to provide a catch-up webinar on where we are with indicators, all the work that has been done, because we know that Germany, for example, has done some work, the IOMC, UNEP, and ourselves, and we'd be very happy in terms of progressing this that we could offer some technical webinar in the coming months. So that's just regardless of whichever option is decided to go forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kay. Next is Laura Nazef from the USA.
Yes, thank you. We very much appreciate the proposal from the co-facilitators. We prefer option 1, though with an added emphasis on further work to develop the draft targets. And also we think that until we can progress on the targets, we think it's premature to establish a technical expert group to work on the indicators as outlined in option 2. Thank you.
I see Auden. Thank you, Laura. Next, Auden from Norway.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to the co-facilitators and the Secretariat for the proposal on the further process. We would prefer option 2, and that is because we would prefer the iterative approach. That was also explained at the Cambridge workshop. We see it as an advantage to go back and forth between the targets and the indicators in order to improve both of them. And we very much would welcome the proposal from UK to host a webinar on the indicators, as this would be one step in such an iterative process. Thank you.
Thank you, Auden. I see Sarah Coombs from Canada, followed by Abbas from Iran. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to reiterate our thanks to the co-facilitators for all this work. It's a tremendous amount of work, and we really, really do appreciate your efforts. We think there's been substantial progress in this group, and we would like to see the work continue on, noting that some stakeholders and countries have indicated challenges in terms of virtual work, but we would really hope that we could overcome those challenges and find some innovative ways to progress that. We prefer option 2, but probably could work with option 1. Our main concern is, as the last speaker said, we would prefer an iterative approach. We think there's substantial work to be done, and we think sort of putting everything into one basket may complicate things. So we would also really like to see some experts assisting with the development of the indicators. So that's why we mainly prefer option 2, but we think that option 1 could integrate that as well. But just ensuring that any one group doesn't take too much that they can chew, if you know what I mean. And by the way, you were talking about temperatures this morning when you first started. It's minus 28 with the wind chill here in Canada. So
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. I hope you're working from home and didn't have to get outside. Over to Abbas from Iran.
Thank you very much. I should appreciate the good work of the Secretariat and co-facilitators in our group and developing these documents. We support option 1 because we think it's too early to establish an indicator group. We think there is much work to do in our group to finish and develop proposals on target, and after that it will give a better guidance for establishing an indicator group. And then my second point is that now with postponement of IPCM 5 and IP, we have more time to have more discussion and deliberation in our group. So we think we should not hurry on establishing indicator group. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas. I see Michelle Sheeran from Switzerland.
Thank you very much. Good day to everyone. We would also like to thank the co-facilitators and the Secretariat for the big amount of work that they have done for the group. We think there has been good substantial progress, and we are convinced that the work should go on. It's important to continue the work. And of course, we do acknowledge that there are some difficulties and that were signaled for the participation in the work, and we think that these should be overcome in the way forward. We have a preference for option 2, hence the iterative approach, as also mentioned by others. And we think it would be important that we have the option of including also other experts on some parts of the discussion if needed and as appropriate. And we too welcome very much the UK proposal. I think that's a good idea, such a webinar. And perhaps also that would exactly also be an opportunity to check what kind of additional expertise is needed in which area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we have Carolyn Vickers, WHO.
Yes, thank you, and hello, everyone. The organizations participating from the IOMC in this group have put forward a submission, and we hope that you have seen that. At the previous discussion on this issue, the organizations expressed a preference for option 2, and we outlined our reasons for that. I simply wanted here to reiterate the offer of the organizations to contribute significantly to the work on indicators. We believe that very useful to do some foundational work on the technical aspects, and that this fits best within option 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next is Leah Esquilo. Could you also just identify your organization, please, Leah? Thanks.
And to the Secretariat and to all for the hard work that we've reached up to now. In relation to the options, like many of the ones before me, option 1 is also not a favorite of IPAN. One reason is because we prefer a process where those looking into the formulations and drafting are more participatory, with more expertise, not just in terms of data or technical, but even in relation to content, knowledge on chemical safety, environmental protection. So we would prefer a multi-stakeholder involvement in the process. Also, we also have strong reservations on a fully virtual process. Because we've seen in the past many meetings, both here and in the other platforms, that there's a lot of difficulty, even from among the NGO, civil society, to participate, actually from everyone, to participate because of connectivity issues. And even then, this platform, of course, we can't take whole day, right? I mean, there's only so much time we could provide, have the energy for this kind of engagement. So it's very difficult to engage in this process, which affects the ability of people to participate. So those 2 points for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Now have Anastasia Swearingen from ICCA. Go ahead, Anastasia.
Hi, ICCA wants to thank the co-facilitators and the Secretariat for all the hard work on putting these proposals together and these documents. We think it's very useful, and we fully support continuing the negotiations in the absence of a clear in-person meeting anytime soon this year. We recognize the need to continue work on the targets, but also advance on the indicators, and feel that by working on some of the indicators, I think it will help shape where some of the targets aren't quite as measurable, and help with the wording of those targets. So we look forward to the continued process, and the offer from the UK to host such a webinar would be very useful. We also think that inclusion of experts would be excellent in this process, but suggest that perhaps they join the larger group rather than have a separate work stream, so that the policy folks and the experts could work together on formulating the indicators and targets.
Thank you, Anastasia. Next, we have Matheus Bastos from Brazil. Please go ahead, Matheus.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to once again express our thanks to the co-facilitators for the hard work that has been done so far. As we have indicated in our written submissions, we have a preference towards option 2, basically because we have seen that the exercise of formulating appropriate indicators under virtual meetings is not an easy task. So we look forward to continuing this debate and our efforts in improving the targets and indicators under discussion. So the idea of creating a technical expert group to support our job would, I think it would be beneficial to the group. And of course, we still need to specify the nature of this technical expert group, especially regarding its participation, mandate, and methodology of work. But option 2 still seems to be the best alternative in our vision so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Matheus. I don't see any other hands up at the moment, Sylvia Wahira.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you for your comments, all of you. And it seems we have, you know, there is a clear message that I'm getting from I think all of you, as far as I understood, was no one is in favor of option 3. So I can imagine that the new situation where it's unclear whether there will be, when there will be some face-to-face, that we would like to use the time before IP4 and ICC M5 to do some work. Correct? No one is for option 3. I just want to clarify that. Okay, so I think, sorry.
I see a hand up, Leah Esquilo, go ahead.
In our submission, we originally opted for option 3. However, because of the development, in the SciChem Bureau decisions, we are leaning towards option 2, but not fully. We feel we will propose certain, hopefully, conditions for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to our process forward, we discussed this in our previous meeting that you know, we could set out very clearly, if we could agree, one option. And I understand that everyone, I mean, if we look at the options as being, you know, having parts of one another, then let's say option 2 contains that a part of what is in option 1. So in that sense, we also agree on the fact that we should be moving forward with policy expert work. So the question is whether we also move forward with the technical work. So what we had discussed last time, if you remember, was that if we could not agree fully on one particular option, that what we would do is we would present to the Bureau in our recommendations the options that we prefer, and allow the Bureau to take that decision. So if I understand the discussion well, I would suggest that that's what we do. We would move forward with option 1 and option 2, excluding option 3, as at this time we don't feel it is appropriate. As IPEN, I think, explained very well, the situation has changed. And that's the way we could present it to the Bureau And now, if you would agree that way, then we could look at what how we would the outcome document would look. Jill, please.
Thank you. Sorry, because when I spoke at the beginning, we didn't say anything about the options. We, like many, would go for option 2, but we would like to refine it slightly to suggest, this is the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, that the next stage should be actually a technical group on indicators, because quite a lot of people have talked about the need to refine the targets in the light of indicators. So we think that would be the better way around to do it. I mean, our ideal solution would be to bring the strategic objectives into the mix, but if that's not possible, then we should work from the very bottom, the indicators upwards, and show that some of the targets don't actually make sense when you try and bring indicators for them, and ditto for the strategic objectives. So if we started at the base now, we think we would make more progress. Thank you.
Okay.
Matthias Wolf from the EU.
Yeah, sorry for taking the floor again in this regard, but just coming back to what Jill said for GAHP, we have some concern as EU that the work on indicators might hinder the definitely necessary work on targets. And so far, I'm not sure whether we could follow what Jill proposed. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you hear me quite good, because it seems that I'm hard to understand. But yeah, that's just what we would like to say. We think it's necessary to have both groups in parallel. One focusing on the targets, one focusing on indicators, the technical work, and in this regard, really welcome the offer by IOMC to take a leading role in this technical process. And we believe that, like many other colleagues said before, that it should be an iterative process, meaning once there's some outcome from a technical expert group on indicators, that should, of course, influence the work on targets, but the target work shouldn't stop just for looking on indicators. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands, Sylvia and Wahira.
Okay.
Okay, so I think the way we could move forward then is to, if there, I mean, the US made a comment on the suggestion they had in their written submission to add on to the policy expert group. So that comment we have, and then if we move to option 2 on the next slide. So we've also received some written comments on the option 2. I understood from Jill's comment that the idea is to reverse the order, to like start now with indicator and policy. So that is something that we can ask the Bureau for guidance on how to consider. But otherwise, I would now, besides the work, besides the written submissions, or if you want to reiterate the written submissions, besides those comments that you've given us, is there any additional comments you would like to make to option 2, what you feel should be elaborated in the text? Because then we will prepare then the outcome document with a presentation of these 2 options to the Bureau for their decision on which option they would choose forward. And then I assume then there would be further work in elaboration of the mandate more specifically. So I would ask you for comments on the presentation of the option 2 mandate and what it was supposed to do. Aude, please.
Thank you very much. From our side, we think that Jill has a point with indicating that we should look at the indicators at this point. The indicator list is currently quite crude, but I think that instead of using a technical expert group to look at the indicators at this point, maybe we could have a policy expert group by SciChem stakeholders could look at it first, because I don't think the indicators list is mature enough to be the starting material for a technical expert group with external statistical experts and so on. So we can also have a different starting point in time for these two groups, and the policy expert group could go first and revise the indicators list and also consider the targets afterwards. And then we could pass on the indicators to the technical expert group, so they will have a better starting point for their work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We have Suki from Japan, followed by WHO Carolyn. Go ahead, Suki.
Thank you, everyone. This is Suki from Ministry of Environment of Japan. Japan would like to thank the co-facilitators and the Secretariat for your hard work. We support option 2 for the reasons that were mentioned by all the colleagues. Additionally, we think that the formulation of target and indicator must have a clear linkage with the modality of taking stock of progress currently being discussed by the virtual working group too. We are also of the view that while deciding indicators, the process indicators and impact indicators should be considered separately. For example, process indicators could be as simple as if your country ban international illegal trade, yes or no. And in this case, it could be reviewed frequently, such as annually. As to see impact of the beyond 2020 instruments, it takes 5 or 10 years to actually see the impact. Therefore, we believe that the process indicators and impact indicators should be considered separately. And the membership of technical subgroup should ensure the subgroup have people with appropriate scientific expertise. We could invite other stakeholders as observers to facilitate the iterative process between policy expert group and the technical expert subgroup. Sorry for the long comment. And lastly, we also think that it is premature at this stage to consider a process to develop a internationally standardized methodology and database. Thanks.
Thank you, Japan. Carolyn Vickers, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. In the IOMC submission, we've provided some detailed comments first on the participation of the groups to indicate the open nature of the technical expert group. We've also provided some clarifications on the indicator work, including identifying indicators that already have an agreed methodology, a data source and a custodian, identification of gaps and suggestions for the way forward. In relation to the comment that the indicators may not be in a good enough state to do anything with, I'd just like to remark that it's the product of a number of discussions, including quite a big multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder process. And it might be a good opportunity now to have another look at it from the other perspective, which is the technical work on the criteria, the metadata requirements, etc. That might then make a more productive second round of discussion among the multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral group, rather than trying to negotiate among the indicators that are currently there, which ones would go forward to the technical expert group. So I think we'd still have a preference for having some technical group now before going to the policy group for feedback. one significant point we wanted to make in relation to the 4 points, which would be in its task, we don't believe that a discussion about hosting options for a database is probably the best task for this kind of group. It's more of a management task than one for technical experts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah Coombs from Canada.
Yes, thank you. We would like to thank the IOMC for offering their expertise for moving forward on these complex issues. We see much benefit in utilizing the expert knowledge offered on indicator development, including indicators already in use, particularly with regards to providing advice on what data is available, measurable, and in determining how to collect the data that is not currently available. We agree with the need for an iterative process between the indicators expert group and the targets policy group, if you will. With this in mind, given the focus on targets over the past few months, it seems timely to have a similar period of focused effort on the indicators, notwithstanding the continued work on the targets. There's also possible time-saving efficiency for this option, as the iterative work will allow the formulation of targets and indicators to evolve together and help to avoid inconsistencies between the lists of targets and indicators should indicator development be delayed to after the targets. It will be important that these discussions are informed by the indicator experts, by those knowledgeable about managing and reporting on chemicals and waste programs activities. So it is important that the policy and chemicals management experts are involved as well. And we would also add to include experts from different sectors and stakeholder groups. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands at this time, Sylvia Wahira.
Okay, so let's move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And if we can move ahead, I think it's 2 slides now. So we have agreed not to include option 3. So what we will be doing is, using the comments that you've provided us in the written submission, as well as your considerations now, we will adapt the recommendations document, excluding option 3 and elaborating these 2 options 1 and option 2 for moving forward as an outcome document of our group as suggestions for the way forward to the Bureau. So that will be part 2 of our outcome document, which will come from the finalization of this group's work today. So the second part of the first part, which we will discuss now, of the outcome document, if I can have the next slide, is maybe the more difficult one, because it's dealing with not just thinking about what we suggest for the way forward, but kind of creating information on how what it is that we have determined during this process. So what we're going to do is include in this part of the group's outcome document, we are going to include what issues were not covered by our virtual working group. So these on the screen now are those that were already tabled when we started our work by the technical working group that developed IP4/3 document. And then to these, I mean, if you recall our discussions at the first meeting we had, then we agreed that we would not go into great detail on these discussions. So the term of waste, the reference of countries or governments, the elaboration of timeframes, specific definitions, and also the name of the future instrument. So these are things that need to be discussed, but we did not dedicate time to having deep discussions on this currently. Next slide. So we have added to these issues that we are also have identified as things that we were not able to also discuss in enough detail or resolve in enough detail. And these are those that were, first is the comments related to confidential business information, which we discussed, I think it was in our first meeting already, if not second, that these issues need to be considered by the group developing the high-level declaration. So this is an issue that we will put in the document, outcome document. Then we have discussed in, I think, almost all of our meetings, someone has raised the issue of the development further of the indicator framework as it progresses. There needs to be a consideration of some sort of limit to the number of targets. So we have, again, not dealt with that, but this is something that needs to be brought forward to the next work that is taken into consideration. The third is that there needs to be some sort of iterative process together with indicators, whether that's now or later, but it will need to happen in order to capture and develop a comprehensive framework for the instrument. And we also added from Jill's intervention the last bullet that also there's the need to look back at the strategic objective formulations as well. So that would come together in the consideration of the comprehensive framework for the instrument, which is in bullet 3. Then another point is clarifying the definition of sustainable alternatives has come up in the discussion of the targets, and also a need to reference a definition for sustainable green chemistry. So that goes along with the previous remarks that have been made on circular economy and waste. So then the next that we felt is more a general comment that we need to move forward in this process is the need to capture the 11 elements of the overall oriental guidance, so these would be added to the previous general comments within the outcome document as something that needs to be passed forward as general considerations that have to be considered in the further process. Next slide. So yes, so what we have done as co-facilitators together with the Secretariat is that we have you have received, and it's also on the website, we have prepared co-facilitators reflections of progress made on the part 1 of our mandate. So the finalization as it was formulated of targets, which I think we all can recognize that we have not finalized work on this, on the targets. However, I think it is important that we do have some sort of way to capture the progress. So I think that the time that all of you have invested, both in written submissions and also in our deliberations, we have really, I think you yourselves mentioned it in our last meeting, that we have made progress. We have made a lot of considerations, and it would be, it would be only the Latvian word comes to me now, and nobody can help me with that, right? It would be unfortunate if we wouldn't be able to some way capture that, so that regardless of when the work continues and who will be continuing the work, they will have at least our thoughts and considerations that they can use to build further upon that work. So what we did is we the co-facilitators and the Secretariat, we developed what we called our reflections on the progress that we've made, and we've structured it as follows. So the first is the possible formulation of targets that we have selected, and it's based on points of convergence that we have heard and read on the views that have been expressed by yourselves during virtual meetings and in the written submissions, including new targets which we've included in this part, for which the formulation gained overall support. So those new targets are in the first section of the document. So yes, you know, all of us don't agree for sure on what the co-facilitators in these reflections have contained, but the idea is that the idea is, and this is our proposal, that we agree enough that we can accept this as a general reflection of our discussion. And then the second structure, the second part of this, the structure for this, in this reflections document, is the considerations and components of each target. So we felt it important to write these considerations. They are not to be part of the document, the framework when it's developed, but it's meant as a kind of a guidance for anyone who is working further on the targets to understand what kinds of discussions we were having and to reflect what we felt was important to consider under this target, or what was important to consider further in considering the formulation of the target. So we recognize that our discussion has not finished. We recognize that the target formulation is not finalized, it's not perfect, and it's by no means agreed by all. So we're including in considerations the different things that you have expressed during the discussion, with which we think in further consideration of this target formulation, people should be taken into account. And then the components of each target is meant just to kind of understand the scope kind of the target, or what kind of issues are contained on this target. And then the third part of this document, or this potential outcome document for this part of our work, is are the new targets proposed by the stakeholders. So that we do not lose anything that has been submitted in the written submissions, we've also put that as I can't remember if it's an annex it's called, or amendment to the reflections document. So here there's those new targets that were not discussed maybe at length and did not gain overall support during discussions, but we want to make sure that they're mentioned. So what we would like to suggest now is that we go through these targets and consider them one by one, and see if we can agree that this could be the outcome document for our group. So before I start this laboring task, maybe I just stop here and just ask if there are any questions or any kind of clarifications that you would like to make before we go into more depth on the reflections document. Okay, I understand there's no one, so you're keen to move on, which I consider a very positive positive signal. So thank you for that. So we move to the first slide, and just to make things a bit easier for us to get through, we've actually not have a couple more on each slide. So hopefully you can read it. So here we have the target 1, where we have selected one of the formulations that was presented, and where we have identified the considerations which were for this particular target, which we could gather from the written submissions and from the listening to the recordings of our meetings and also looking at our meeting notes, is that the target needs not to be the sole responsibility of governments and countries, and there's certain flexibility that should be allowed for measures instead of plans for this target, and that the target needs to have a clear reference to legal frameworks as per the WWG. And then we also have the components listed here. So the second target then was in general, from the information that we gathered, was not the best target, and that it should not be used, and that it should be, there was a general agreement to merge several targets under A, and one of those was A2 could merge with 3 and 4. So that's why this one is deleted here. And also there was under this target the thought that targets under the strategic objective C, which focus on issues of concern, cover this target quite sufficiently. And then we have target 3, where there was the idea to merge A2 to 4 and to include all stakeholders that have a role in implementing and enforcing measures. And further discussion, so we're identifying here in this consideration that there is further discussion needed on inclusion of minimization of negative impact. So we did not find a solution in our group how to integrate that and include it in this particular target, but we did identify that there is a need for that in considering this target further. As well as there should be a proper consideration of indicators that could provide values to reflect different measures implemented among the stakeholders. So that's another thing that we identify, which we give in the process further to others. It might be, some of us might be the same, but still for others to take into account, just to table kind of our discussion. So questions on these 3? Any comments you have? Any issues that are not included in the considerations that we need to include as we move forward?
I see Jill from Global Alliance. Jill?
Thank you very much, and thank you to the co-facilitators and the Secretariat for this list. Perhaps I should have made one point when you were introducing the overall concept, and that is, if I've counted correctly, you have 25 targets in here. And supposing they all had a couple of indicators, that is an awful lot. And it may be necessary to see if we really could manage that many, especially in a situation where the Secretariat, which is going to have to jog people's memories that they should be supplying data and so on, is at the moment supposed to be run entirely on voluntary contributions, which is not the sort of Secretariat that has much spare capacity. At least that's our experience to date. So overall, with GAP, we wonder if this is actually feasible. We would like it to be feasible because we'd like to think a different way about the Secretariat, but it is pretty ambitious. That said, I raised my flag really for target A1, because we have a slight problem in understanding this. Is this, it seems to be at a higher level of a higher conceptual level than the others, because what is being proposed, if we understand correctly, is that measures are identified within the instrument and updated every X years. So this is a target for amending the instrument. rather than a target for anybody to do anything about in their own policies and activities at a national or level or by a stakeholder of any sort. If that's a misunderstanding, then perhaps the formulation needs to be different. If that is a right understanding of this target, shouldn't this be somewhere in governance on the question of periodic reviews and how often you need to look at the nature of the instrument? So that's our question on target A1. On target A3, this is a very good target, but the minimizing harm from chemicals through their life cycle needs to be more clear in the objective as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I can just come back. So the general comment on the targets, I completely agree on the number that there, but I think I noted in the, if we go back 2 slides, I think that's one of the issues that we have targeted as a general comment for our general issues in the outcome document. So I think it's a recognition of the fact that the work isn't over, but there has been some progress. And I would just caution, you know, I mean, that's where, you know, there is kind of a fine line of what our reflections are trying to do and what is possible to do. So I don't want our reflections, you know, to be considered as, you know, we've tried to capture what we've discussed. So if there are issues that we have not had a chance to discuss, then we could expand maybe on the considerations. But at this stage to discuss the formulations, I think that then we would need, then it would be just a signal that this is we're very unhappy with the target A1. And that would be the kind of the message that we would give in the outcome document. Because if we go into deep discussions now on each target, I'm afraid that we are you know, going through another cycle of discussing targets, and that wasn't the intent of this document. So let's try to see where the errors are and give us some comments on additions that we should make in the considerations or cautions you have, and then that will help us to understand if we can move this forward as an outcome of the group or not.
Okay, Sylvia, so we will open up for the round of comments that remain.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Okay, so we have Kay Williams from the UK, followed by Laura Nazef, USA. Go ahead, Kay.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, co-facilitators, for this slide with the 3 targets. I think overall, it's just with target A1, just very briefly, I think we need to look at whether what we're trying to do here, is there some duplication because we've included companies now with the other strategic objective, which is coming under D. Our view is that we really need that clear reference to those legal frameworks, which is where we were originally. The additional point that I would like to raise was also about the language that we're using, because how we communicate this framework moving forward will be absolutely critical. We want to raise the political profile of our work. We want to be able to communicate it to the public. And in the years that I've been working in this area, I have found it very difficult to communicate sound management of chemicals and wastes. Ministers tend not to understand it, as do other stakeholders who do not directly work in this area. So I would like there to be some reflection on the specific language as we go through, especially that term sound management of chemicals and wastes. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kay. Next speaker is Laura Naza from the USA, followed by Suki from Japan. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. Just in looking at targets A1 and A3, we do think it's important in target A1 to emphasize measures to be taken by countries and to mention also the importance of having chemicals management systems at the national level. So we would suggest having A1 focus on countries identifying and implementing measures. We don't think that these need to be identified within the instrument and updated. We already have the work that was done to develop the OOG and the 11 elements. But then we think that it would be good to also have similar language of what we're trying to achieve in A1 and A3, achieving the sound management chemicals, something that has a positive aspect to it. So those are our comments right now on these targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Suki from Japan, followed by Claudia Kamke. Suki, please go ahead.
Thank you. We believe that when we use the word measures, that includes plan, do, check, and action, and periodic update happens. But how often it happens differs based on country, circumstance, and what we tackle. So we don't think we should include the specific every XX years. And also, we can agree to what Laura from US just said, that it doesn't need to be companies and government. We first thought to suggest private sector and government, but it can be countries. And then lastly, the A3 sounds quite similar to the strategic objective itself. So we may need to look at it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Suki. Next is Claudia Kamke. Claudia, please also identify your organization. Thanks.
Yes, hello, I'm Claudia Kamke from UNECE, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And I just wanted to add that we feel at UNECE that also the concept of accident prevention, preparedness and response is something that has not been, let's say, included yet or covered through the targets and the indicators as we have read the document. So I think one of the points that could be included more is also the targets or indicators that would look at accident prevention, the safe storage or processing of chemicals, including also the prevention of accidental pollution of water, soil, and so on. So we feel that I mean there are instruments available that cover this. I mean, as I'm from UNECE, for example, the UNECE Convention on the Transboundary Effects of Industrial Accidents, but also at UNECE we have other MEAs that are relevant in this regard. And I mean, we are also glad to contribute to this. But yeah, just one thought from our side. Thanks.
Thank you, Claudia. I don't see any other speakers. I see Matthias from the EU, followed by Sarah Coombs from Canada. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thanks, Brenda. And starting in general, EU and member states want to thank again the co-facilitators for that paper, what we think would be a very good outcome of our virtual working group and should be the basis for the further discussion on targets as well as on indicators. With regard to targets A1 to A4, we are quite fine with the proposals for now. Of course, discussion is still needed. With regard to target A1, we still don't see really a need for it, but if it's there, then it's really important as it's declared here already in the considerations, that there's a reference to legal frameworks and even more to the orientation and guidance to make clear that we do not start from the scratch. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Matthias. Sarah Coombs, followed by Abbas from Iran. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. So noting that Sophie's comments that these are not necessarily agreed to and they are movable, I guess we were quite surprised about A1, given also that it does say that targets need the clear reference to legal frameworks. So I thought that there was a little bit more consensus towards the A1s that are now in the appendix, A1 or alt, certainly wordsmithing to be done, but with a clear reference to implementation by governments and the focus on legal frameworks. I also agree with Jill's initial comment that this A1 seems to be sort of at a higher level or a different plane, so it's maybe a bit difficult to measure, and also with the I agree with the US comments generally on A1, and that there isn't really the need for the identified in the instrument. That just seems to complicate things a bit. So generally with the rest, I think we're fine for now, but we were rather surprised with A1. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next is Abbas from Iran, followed by Anastasia from ICCA. Go ahead, Abbas.
Thank you. Regarding target A1, we think that referring to companies and governments in this target is necessary. However, we all understand that the responsibility of implementing this target is not just for two stakeholders. It is the responsibility of all stakeholders and sectors. But all we know is that the main responsibility rests with companies and governments. Thank you.
Thank you. Abbas, please go ahead, Anastasia.
Hi, in the interest of time, I'll be brief. I just want to echo that we also were a bit surprised that this target doesn't, target A1 doesn't reflect the need for legal frameworks and the implementation of those. So we would just like to see that included in the target.
Thank you, Anastasia. Sylvia, we're here. I don't see other hands up.
Okay. So thank you very much. So I think that what we can do then is, taking into account of what you have reflected, is I think, as some of you suggested, is to move back to the A1 and the alt and leave them as they were, and to expand maybe the considerations. You know, from the notes we've taken, we'll expand the considerations to include the concerns you have on the target A1. And then I understood the rest would be okay. So then we would move then to the next slide. So thank you for your comments, and I think that's yeah, heard loud and clear, and apologies. We tried our best, but of course it was a challenge to try to capture perfectly how we can move forward. So thank you for that, and I hope that with that it would be okay. So then the next one would be target A5, which is before you now, and of course I'm cautious now to ask whether this is okay. I hope we've managed to capture the discussion, but if not, then please let us know, and we can either expand on the considerations or look at how to make sure that it's okay for movement forward further. So I give you the floor on the A5.
Okay, so Laura from the USA, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. I think this target just needs maybe a word added there before obligations. Countries take measures supportive of their obligations. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands.
Okay, thank you. We'll make that change. Next slide, please. Here we have the new targets. So we included the new targets here that we that were discussed during the discussions and that we felt had some acceptance from the group on it. So we felt there was enough of kind of a discussion that we could capture them here. And of course, take into account what Jill said, of course there's way too many targets. We will have to deal with that at some point. But I think it is important to capture where we had some interest, and then moving forward in target formulation or combining that with indicators, it would be possible to at least capture these ideas, or at least to have further discussion on them. So please, I open the floor for these new targets that were we felt had a general kind of acceptance by the group that they could move forward in some manner.
Okay, I don't see any hands up. Oh, Laura Nazef from the USA. Please go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. I didn't want to be the only one, but I did have a couple of points. Just on target AYY. We think that this includes the measurement of outcomes from activities that are outside the Beyond 2020 instrument, and that perhaps a target for the instrument should be closer to the 2020 goal, that chemicals are produced and used in ways that lead to minimization of significant adverse impacts. So just wanted to raise that for consideration. And then target AZZ, we do support, having, we think there's a role for the Beyond 2020 instrument to include something related to standards, but we would have some edits to suggest to this target when we get further into those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next we have Matthias Wolf, followed by Johanna. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thank you. Yeah, we support the first both proposals. And with regard to target AYY, we find it very important to clearly link to other sectors and to other SDGs, and in this regard to ecosystems and biodiversity, and mention chemical pollution. So yeah, we are very supportive of that goal target. With regard to target AZZ, we support the intention, but we still think that it would be better placed under strategic objective D, as DEA targets, in our understanding, focusing more on legal action, enforcement, and things like that, and private standards, etc., do not really fit in our understanding under objective A. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Next we have Jill Hanna, followed by Anastasia. Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you very much. I think GAP would think that these are very important, and actually these certainly target AYY is more like the objective, and it's even an overall objective. I recall that rather than a target under one of the strategic objectives, if you like, it's almost up at the vision level. But we wouldn't want it to get lost as in that way. We believe that sorry, I'm remembering that Kay Williams from the UK said earlier that trying to explain phrases like sound management of chemicals and waste, which we're all very accustomed to ministers is always extremely difficult. And certainly when I was employed by the European Commission, that was my experience too. And when you turn it into talk about pollution, which is the outcome if you don't manage soundly, that makes sense to people. Now, what we have as a problem with AYY is very obvious from our name, the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, because we don't understand why this is ecosystem services and biodiversity, which we would like to keep, but not human health. Because actually, as far as we can see in the current list of targets, there isn't the same one for humans. We seem to be concerned with everything around us, but not with ourselves. So we actually would like to combine them or have them as two separate objectives right up at the top, into which all these strategic objectives, which are housed, legal frameworks and so on, the A targets, as Matthias has said, the A targets are on the whole legal frameworks, and that's an important set of how you get to the overall objective. But we think that burying AYY down here is not quite the right place for it. Where third-party non-governmental standards goes, we don't have a view about it, but certainly the idea that these schemes are held up to some kind of scrutiny, which is what I think is being talked about here, so that we're not advocating greenwashing. We want these kind of schemes to have some real relevance and importance. I think that's what's being talked about, is extremely important. On the other hand, it's an absolutely huge challenge because every private or non-governmental body will have its own ideas about standards and labels and certification schemes. They proliferate all over the place. So I just feel it's important to warn that actually monitoring that target will be very, very resource intensive, but it is an important one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Next, we have Anastasia from ICCA, followed by Olga. Please go ahead, Anastasia.
Thanks, Brenda. So on target AXX, we support adding this target. On target AYY, I think we share a little bit of the questions presented earlier about some of the wording and the scope. We really support the need for linkage to the biodiversity framework, and note the comments made by GAP on the link to human health as well. But I think we have some questions about really what's meant by levels that are not detrimental or harmful to ecosystem. I think this is one where we would really need to understand the indicators to maybe understand what the target is really going for here. On AZZ, we note that we support the EU, I believe it was, that noted it would fit better under Objective D, noting that this is primarily focused on legal frameworks in Objective A, and also note that, this is, as GAP mentioned, a very resource-intensive process, and noting that there are some questions that we have about the wording of this, and in particular, how it would interact with the third-party standards that are already, regulated by other bodies. So I think that this target, we really see a need for a much further discussion on. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. Next, we have Olga Sparanskaya. Olga, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm talking on behalf of a group of NGOs. So as to target AYY, we think that this target is really general, and for a number of chemicals, we do not even know what the level of no harm or no effects might be, and we also do not know how to consider the combination effects of certain chemicals. So we have some suggestions for the text for this target. So I will put it into the chat box. And for the consideration of everyone, regarding AZZ, so we think that there was an attempt from the Secretariat to capture some of our ideas that we put into target B3 in our submission, but we believe that our target was much more focused and could be used either in brackets or as target AZZ base, or should be included for others to consider. And I will put this our suggestion for these targets in the chat box as well. And in general, I would like to say that, as we all know, our first submission, even though it was submitted on time, was not considered for, for some technical reasons, or it was not considered yet. So in the targets that we see now, many of our proposals were not included. And it is not about new targets, it's about even the text that we suggested to be part of the already existing targets. So we are not sure how to proceed with this, noting that this is our last meeting, or the last meeting of this group. So we could either send an additional submission to the Secretariat with all our ideas included, or we are waiting for other guidance from the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Next, we have Claudia from the UNECE, followed by Matus from Brazil.
Yes, thank you. I would also like to comment on target AYY. I think it would be important that pollution is here also understood as including accidental pollution, and if that's the case, then of course, I mean, accidents must be prevented in the first instance, and for that, I think it's crucial that safety is put forward, and safety basically must come first, and operators have the obligation to ensure that their hazardous operations are basically safe. And I think, this is, I think this, as I mentioned before, this concept of preventing accidents in the first instance is key. And if they cannot be prevented, then at least, I mean, operators must be prepared, and authorities must be ready to respond to this quickly. So contingency plans, on-site, off-site, and also harmonized across countries must be in place. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Claudia. Next is Matus from Brazil, followed by Sarah Coombs from Canada. Go ahead, Matus.
Thank you very much. Also, as for target AYY, we would also like to raise the point for consideration. We agree that the language of this target should be adjusted in order to focus on the SDGs agenda and the Dubai Declaration vision, because including linkages to other specific agenda, they are already addressed by other international instruments in the MEAs, can present unintended corollaries, especially because it may, in some sense, cause budgetary burdens due to the need to further financial allocation that is not yet guaranteed in the current SICAM framework, nor in the Beyond 2020 instrument. So since targets and indicators have a clear direct relation to what the stakeholders will have to do in the near future, we also think it is important to bear this financial aspect in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Matus. Sarah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Our understanding is that AYY is a shared target with the proposed diversity framework. The idea is to have a concrete link between the two frameworks. So perhaps that's a question, just to clarify that. On the use of the term pollution, while we recognize the attraction to use this word for easier communication, unfortunately, the term pollution would not cover all of the health and labor aspects of chemicals and management waste, so we would need to overcome that issue. I'm thinking about things like exposure to chemicals and products, not just at end of use, and chemicals in the workplace, as was just mentioned by the previous speaker. And just pollution would work when we're talking about ecosystems and biodiversity, but not necessarily in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Next is Auden from Norway, followed by Leah Esquilo. Go ahead, Auden.
Yes, thank you very much. We have very much sympathy with the idea of target AYY, but it is, as pointed out, quite overall and top level. And we also have these top level indicators that were proposed by the IOMC organizations a while ago. So we should make sure that this is not too close to what we already have. And in the target list, maybe it should be made more specific with a more narrow focus, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Auden. Please go ahead, Leah.
Just also want to seek the same guidance as mentioned by a previous speaker. It's more of a general comment because I've seen the whole co-facilitators document, and we see some of our recommendations reflected there. And I know you really want to attempt to be able to take in and reflect all that were inputted by the various groups, but we also see some that are not. So I ask clarity on the process by which the other recommendations could be fully reflected in the outcome document. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Abbas from Iran, you're next and last on my list. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I want to raise points about the target AYY. First, this target maybe to some extent has been addressed by some other international instruments such as climate change agreement. And the second point, my second point is that we support building comments regarding the financial aspects of this target, particularly for developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas. Sylvia, we're here. I don't see any other comments or any other hands up.
Okay, so thank you very much for your comments. So we've made a note of the comments, especially, I guess it was mostly under AYY and AZZ. So we will expand on the considerations in the outcome document for these two targets to include, the considerations and the issues that you have raised in regard to the linkages and the level of this particular AYY target, and in regards to the AZZ target, the issues of perhaps that this would be better under strategic objective D, and also in reference of the ability to measure this and how this will play out. So we will expand on those comments as we move forward in the outcome document. So in regards to your comments on the various proposals that were made, so I tried to explain in my introduction that the attempt has been to, as much as possible, capture from our written submissions, from our discussions from the meeting notes that we've reviewed, the reports, to try to capture as much as possible something so that we can bring something forward to the next group or forum that will be looking at this, so that we capture as much as possible what we have deliberated. So yes, these reflections that will become a part of the outcome document do not show all the possibilities. We had very many suggestions. You know, from the written submissions, I think we have, if we include all the written submissions, we have, you know, more than 300 pages of documents that we would have to reflect. And this is it is a difficult task, of course, and I understand that there are not every proposal is reflected here, and that is why we have tried to at least then include in the considerations part of this document those issues that need further consideration, and we've tried to include you know, the different elements of those other things that have been raised, rather than put in all the different ways to introduce different elements in the targets. So there is also, as I explained in the beginning, there is an annex to this, which is a list of the new targets proposed that were not discussed and did not receive the overall general agreement of the group during the discussions. Those are in the annex, so they are there. And of course, if new targets that were proposed are not there, then of course you can flag us on that after the meeting as we compile the document further. So agreeably, this is not ideal, I think, but I think it would be much less ideal and unfortunate, much more unfortunate, if we don't manage to bring anything forward from this group on the work that you have invested very much in the target. So that's why we're going through these, and I invite you then to expand on the considerations if you feel that there is something that has not been captured that was discussed during the group. So we can move on then to the Bs. The next slide. So here are for the B1 target, from looking over again the notes and the different written submissions, and also listening to the recordings of the meeting, this is what we would propose could go further. And so I invite you to make any comments if you would like for expansion of the considerations or any other issue with this particular slide.
Okay, so we have Jill Hanna with her hand up. Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you. This is thank you very much for these targets under B. This, of course, is absolutely crucial. Again, it is something that monitoring it could be extremely resource intensive. It depends what kind of indicators would go with it. And therefore, and I also find it quite interesting, I don't want to jump, but you are proposing a target BXX, which has the GHS as a separate target, and one which, after all, the GHS was first invented but in 1992, I think, so it's about time that it was fully implemented. And I think it's right to have it as a separate one. But maybe we need to think about having a few elements like that, GHS, PRTR, maybe something else, as the indicators that would come out of this one, rather than trying to do a huge, completely global assessment of all the data and information on chemicals that's made available by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Next is Carolyn Vickers from WHO.
Thank you. In the discussion on this particular target, we had made the comment that we should remove the words on the global market, and we had quite a bit of support for that because it's necessary to not only look at chemicals which are being sold, but also which people may be exposed to but aren't actually on the market, including through their life cycle, but not only through their life cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthias Wolf, you have the floor. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, we're quite in favor of this target, and would like to make one recommendation in particular for this target. It would be necessary to mention those responsible for all the data and information. I think it goes in the same direction what Jill already said. We made a proposal in this regard in our written feedback, saying in principle that it should be up to those countries where chemicals are produced, that they should define in their legal systems who will be responsible for generating the data and providing the information and so on. Would be good to consider this here in the further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Michelle Sheeran from Switzerland, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. On this target, we would like to comment that we think it would be very important that to specify that the information that is to render accessible, that it's accessible publicly, because we think that otherwise the many stakeholders that, and in particular academia, but many stakeholders that need to be able to work with more, with the information provided, they must be able to have easy access. So it would be good to introduce also that notion. And then I would also like to support the intervention made by the WHO. We think that's an important aspect as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next is Olga Sporanskaya. Go ahead, Olga.
Yes, so thank you very much. So again, we raised concern that our first submission has never been considered, and our text is not included here, nor in brackets, nor as a new suggested text. So we feel really like it's a challenge for us to go through everything again and like look to be sure that our suggestions are considered or bracketed or somehow reflected in the text. So we really prefer to return back to the previous to the previous document and see how this could be addressed. So for example, for B1, we suggested to include gender disaggregated data, and also the data should include GHS formatted information on chemicals properties and hazards, and as well as safe alternatives, and that this information should be accessible to all stakeholders within and outside supply chains. So it is not reflected in B1, and we, as I mentioned before, the same problem, we face the same problem with other targets as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga, for that comment. Next, we have Zuki from South Africa. Please go ahead, Zuki. Zuki, you have the floor, South Africa.
Brenda, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Now we can hear you, Suki. Yes, please go ahead.
Affording me the opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Thank you to the co-facilitators. I'd like to speak directly to what accessibility means for us in the African region. It's far beyond what we have in front of us, because the people that are most affected are the most vulnerable, the illiterate, and none of that which we have in front of us would still make this information accessible. For example, your farm workers and your industrial chemical workers are people, most of them, that are illiterate. So it means that the information should be made available such that they themselves can make informed decisions. And also there's another angle, the issue of language. English is not necessarily a language that is used by everybody. Yes, there are UN languages out there, but then you come to where none of those UN languages are the languages spoken. So that is another issue, and those people are exposed to these chemicals. So we are requesting that be taken into consideration, because we need to ensure that the people that are exposed are able to understand what they are exposed to, and as such make and take informed decisions to protect themselves. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Zuki. We heard you well. I don't see any other hands up at this point, Sylvia and Wahira.
Okay, thank you very much. So I understand, and I've been following the chat also, that I mean, it's on the global market issue was one thing I remember when I was struggling whether to suggest it is to strike it or not, because listening to the discussion and recordings and looking over at my notes, I thought there was a bit you know, an uneven discussion, but now I see that there's a overwhelming support to take that out of this current target formulation. So I think that that we will do so for when we prepare this for the outcome document. And also I'll take into account your expand the considerations under this target, also taking into account the discussions we've had. So thank you very much for that. We'll move on to the next slide then.
Okay, Sylvia, I see Leah has her hand up and it might be related to the previous one. So please go ahead, Leah. I just see that you're there.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's related to the previous one, although it's also a general comment. Basically, it's I'd like to be clarified on the process, because as mentioned earlier by a previous speaker, there were submissions on the targets that were not reflected, that are not reflected. So it's not even new targets, no? It's also proposals in relation to these targets. So how will they be incorporated or reflected? From the very beginning, we were led to believe that this is not the negotiation, right? I think that's clear to everyone. This is an opportunity to gather the thoughts of everyone on board. So I think the minimum should be that that our thoughts, our submissions are reflected here. It's not. I'm sorry, but it's not clear to me how we can proceed when those questions are not answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question, and I'll try to answer. So yes, the reason why, so we've gone through all the written submissions, all the recordings of the meetings, our own notes, and we've tried to find a target formulation that was more generally accepted than where it seemed like the group was going. Because we know it's impossible to include all the different variants of the targets that were proposed by the group. That is why we have included in the considerations, and that's why, you know, I would be happy to hear and expand on these considerations. Those elements that we feel should be brought forward in the discussion. So that's why we have been going through each slide, and I've been opening the floor and asking to expand on considerations that you feel have not been reflected, that were part of the discussion, and that are not reflected in the considerations or the components of the targets under each target. So I understand that that's the discussion that we've had. I think it would be very difficult, and I'm not sure that that's what the group asked the co-facilitators to do. So in the previous meeting, there was quite a clear message, we thought, perhaps we're wrong, asking us to try to compile some sort of document that could be brought forward as the outcome of the different discussions that we've had in the group, so that further work on the targets could be done, and there could be a reflection of the discussion that we've had. Obviously, all written submissions, all recordings are going to be available, but this is an attempt to try to have one place where we try to put as much as possible what has been the progress in our discussions. So I considering the message that I felt that we had from the group last time, we have put in this effort, and I would like to invite you to continue working this way and be involved in the discussion and propose expansion of the considerations or components as you feel fit. But I would caution that it will be difficult, if not impossible, to compile a document that is going to have all the different variants in a document. And in that case, we can move to a document that just has the bullet points as I already presented above, and that's the way we can proceed. So I'm in your hands, because this is the group's work. The co-facilitators and the secretariat developed this document based on the signals that we received from you as a group from the last time we met. We have attempted to go through this exercise ourselves, and then if that is not the way you would like to move forward, that's fine. We can move to bullet points and complete our work in that manner. So I open the floor now to get some indication from the group, because I'm unclear on what you would like for us to do and how you would like us to proceed further.
Okay, I see Leah asking the floor. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, well, basically, we're just apprehensive because, I mean, first of all, we'd like we appreciate all the effort everyone is doing here. No, this is not to discount all the hard work that the co-chairs and the secretariat have put in. We really appreciate it. It's just that we also see a lot of the submissions, both in existing text and new targets that were proposed. And those formulations also on our end, I mean, it went through a whole process also, involving also the stakeholders who represent. And if they're not reflected, we are afraid that eventually, like the work that we've also put in submitting them will go to naught, including the voices of the people that we also consulted in preparing those documents. And it might seem like we are already also agreeing into how these are formulated as is now, because then it'll just be parang we're like just in the considerations or in the annexes like that. So I hope that's not what is intended. Thank you.
Perhaps we can move back in the slide on the structure of this outcome kind of document, reflections document. Can we move back to that slide? There are 3 points, I think, in it. Back. Still back. Yeah, sorry. Now sorry. Back, forward. One more, I think. Yeah. So this is the structure. So I think, you know, it's and I think we tried to put it in the lead into this document that was posted. So saying that this is only a possible formulation of the targets. So it's not anything that we've agreed, and it's just trying to reflect points of convergence of the views expressed, and it includes these consideration components, which provide kind of an explanation of the rationales to further inform the process. So the idea is to, you know, expand these considerations to say kind of where we're at, what was the progress, and what issues we raised in regards to each of these targets. The consideration and the components of the targets is not meant to be as, you know, part of the framework moving forward. It is merely meant to inform the process. And then, you know, the intent was to have this also with the new targets proposed by stakeholders that have not been contained in the new targets that were that did gain overall support in the discussions, or that's what we felt from looking over our notes and re-listening to the recordings and looking at written submissions. So it's not, and if I apologize if that's the impression that I have given, that these are targets that are agreed. It's definitely not the case. So it's, you know, I think, again, I can only reiterate what I have said before, that I think it would be unfortunate if we move back to just making bullet points of what we made. But as I said, I wait for your feedback then, how to move forward, because we can move one slide back if we want to just show. So we can move back to just making these kinds of points, and that can be the result of our work. So we have 4 bullet points already, because I think this 3rd bullet point could be merged with the final bullet point, and we can make a couple more bullet points of our work, and that could be that which we move forward, which will be looked at alongside the IP4/3 document in the further work. But I would just caution that this would be unfortunate, because I think it is difficult. It will be difficult for anyone coming into the process forward if they need to the only documents they have to review are IP4/3, these bullet points, and all your written submissions, which of course stand, but I think it's very difficult for someone, again, to go through the whole process of looking at the listening to the recordings and reading all the written submissions. So again, I just repeat, so we're in your hands. We've done as much as we could do, and we tried to do it in the you know, the time we had, and what mental capacities we could engage. So yeah, it's up to you. Please let us know then how to proceed. We're open to either way is fine and acceptable from our side. It's the group's decision.
Thank you, Sylvia. There are 3 hands up, or maybe a few more actually, but I have Leah, Sarah Coombs, and Jill Hanna. Leah, please go ahead.
I did not raise my hand. I'm also waiting for others to. I'll lower my hand now. Yeah.
Okay, maybe you could put your hand down. Thank you. So we have Sarah Coombs, followed by Jill Hanna, followed by Bob Diedrich. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. I guess it's more of a question, and hopefully the intent is to be helpful, not to create further work or anything. But I was just wondering if there could be a period of written submissions on this document. I think it's very helpful the way you have proceeded with the considerations, and however, it's been a very short time to review it all, to see whether there are some gaps from or perceived gaps, whichever, and real gaps for that are in the document just in a few days. And given that we probably have a little bit more time at our disposal moving forward, I'm just wondering, so that people could feel comfortable that their views and considerations perhaps are integrated, that we could have a couple of weeks or a week or whatever to review the document and put some further suggestions in it. I'm also noting that it's 9:10 and we're at strategic objective B, so there's still a lot to go through, and I do find that this online hearing other people's views is also very helpful, but anyway, just a suggestion. Thank you.
Brenda?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. We have Jill, Hannah, followed by Bob Diedrich. So Jill, please go ahead.
Well, first of all, I would like to completely support the co-chairs in trying to take this step. I think it's the right thing to do. Although, as Gap said right at the beginning of this meeting, we actually have quite a lot of problems with some of the strategic objectives, never mind the targets. But I think we need a snapshot of where we are to go to the Bureau, and this is the best way to do it. There's a lot, I feel a lot of attraction for what I think Sarah Coombs, I think is representing Canada, just said. But the problem is, if we did have a long time, well, some time to reflect on this and further written submissions and all the rest of it, we'd probably need another 2 meetings to sort it out. Now, I'd be very happy to go the extra time, but I'm not sure what the instructions from the co-facilitators to the chairs were, and this could be an endless process. Now, where I think, and I think we all have to understand that we may have made suggestions that we believe in passionately, but we may not have been followed by anybody else. And those suggestions are still on the table because we are not negotiating. They can be brought up at any time in IP4 or indeed at ICCM 5, but they may not be in the front part of this document. But I do recall that the NGO group, and I think Leah is speaking for them, did say, or is at least speaking for IPEN, did say on a couple of previous meetings that there seemed to have been an overlooked submission. So if the Bureau has given instructions of the sort that would not allow us to follow the Canadian suggestion in any realistic timetable, then maybe the thing to do is to pull out those proposals that Leah doesn't feel have found, Leah and Olga don't feel they have found their way sufficiently into the text, and put them in the annex. And then at least they have the status of being in this document without there being an over-exaggeration of the amount of confidence there is around them in the group as a whole. Sorry, I'm not expressing myself very well, but I hope that's understandable. Thank you.
No, I think I understood you very well, Jill. I think the problem is that I think that everyone is making compromises, and many parts of submissions aren't in and able to be deciphered specifically word by word in this this proposal. And I think you know, the attaching all the submissions that feel that they have not been integrated is going to be very difficult. In regards to the suggestion about another written submission, as you noted yourselves, another written submission would mean more meetings. And again, it defeats the purpose of this document. It was not meant to reflect every single detail of every single submission. It was meant to try to reflect the discussion and to try to reflect it. And if you go back to written submissions, it will be an endless cycle, and we will not be able to complete this work, as we have been asked at this point by the Bureau to bring to some close, to be able to then determine what is needed to go further. So I understand, and I think is, you know, it's the amount of work that has been invested, and the fact that we're still very much enthusiastic and motivated to continue working on these targets is absolutely amazing, and thank you for that motivation and inspiration. However, the realities are that there are limitations to capacities, and there's limitations of time that we constraints that we need to meet. So
Brenda, any more hands?
Yeah, Sylvia, would you like me to continue with a couple of the next hands? Okay, perfect. So Bob Diedrich from the OECD, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you much for giving me the word. I was one of those who was pushing that this proposal was developed following our last meeting, and I must say I was very happy with the outcome. I was thinking that it would have been a missed opportunity if we didn't try to push it one step further. And I must say also I'm very happy with the methodology that has been applied. I mean, looking for those places where we believe there is consensus, and implementing them, trying to reflect common understanding in the considerations, trying to expand those considerations to see that whether we are all thinking the same things, and so that maybe we only at the end of the day just need to tweak the language a little bit. So I was very happy with the methodology, and I think we should continue with it. And of course, there will be there's going to be a lot of areas where there's still not consensus, because the opinions are still divergent, but that's okay. We will just need to continue the discussion on those. But as this being our last official meeting, I would just like to reiterate that the methodology that is being proposed is really good, and will allow us to advance. And should we get a mandate to continue this, it will be the right methodology to continue the discussion after today. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. The next speaker is Matthias Wolf.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, try to be brief again. The EU completely agrees with what Jill and Bob already said. It would be really nice to move forward with that list of targets, and we are completely aware of that is not finally discussed, and also a lot of our feedback isn't 100% reflected, but it would be a missed opportunity to not use that progress made compared to SAICM-EP for 3, and to not move forward with the list suggested by the co-facilitators. And with regard to what Sarah from Canada said, we have also very much of sympathy with it, but like Jill said, it's time now to take stock and have a break and compile what's there and see how the further discussion will move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Next is Abbas from Iran.
Thank you very much. We think the problem with this issue that Brazil raised is that this document is mostly concentrated on points of convergence, as it has been referred to in the structure of this document. We think that it is better to reflect also the concept of non-convergence. Not as we agree that it is not possible that all the points in input, in submissions, or interventions in our discussion be included, but we agree that it is not possible. Yet we think that the most important points of non-convergence also should be included in this document as a compilation of all inputs and interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas. Next, we have Olga with her hand up. Please go ahead, Olga.
Thank you very much. We see the problem that, again, referring back to our first submission has never been discussed, and so has never been reflected. And this causes serious problems for us. And we think that in the Secretariat's report, it is important to say that that some stakeholders feel that their submissions have not been discussed or reflected sufficiently, and that more time is needed for internal discussions on these new targets. And also, we need to understand that these are new targets, and that is why they are not agreed, because they are new. Okay, thank you.
Okay, if we can move forward with that, then that would be perhaps good. And I understand we're talking about the submissions of these stakeholders to targets A and B, not the others. So it's specifically one submission. So yes, if it would be possible then to, with that note, move further. As someone noted, there's not that much time left for us to discuss in our last meeting. Or sorry, Brenda, are there more people waiting for the floor?
We have Andrea Rother asking for the floor. Andrea, is it related to this?
And good afternoon to colleagues. And I'd like to say thank you very much to the co-facilitators and the Secretariat for doing a good job of herding cats, which is never easy. The comment I want to make is just not to create more work, but just for a consideration. And I think one of the things that might help is the targets are never going to reflect everyone's consideration. And of course, we're trying very hard to get to a point where everyone's comfortable with them. And we've raised the issue again and again about, perhaps some of the issues that are missing could be picked up in the indicators. So I wonder if it would be worth having one more point underneath the targets that say considerations for the indicators. That could be just a list of some of the key issues that people are unhappy with that have been left out. And so then when this is taken forward, there's a realization that these things have been discussed and people have raised these issues, and whoever works on the indicators can then flag those issues related to the targets. So that's just a consideration, and I really don't want to create more work. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, and I understand your suggestion, and I think it would work if we would have had enough discussion about indicators. But actually, you know, going through the targets, we've been a lot of times not even going into discussion on the indicators, and thus I think it would be very difficult for myself, Wahida, and the Secretariat to extract from our discussions enough information on what we have said on each target in regard to the indicators. So I think that I understand your point, but I'm afraid that during the, you know, total how many hours discussion have we had, I don't think that my chair almost broke. I don't think we've had enough substance that we could have put there. But what we could is reflect upon how we can maybe in these points that are now on the screen, we could make a statement on that there was not, the discussion was concentrated on targets, and thus maybe we can, but we'll work on that formulation, what we could put there. So thank you for your constructive approach, and I understand the willingness now to move on. So I hope someone remembers which slide we were on, whether it was B2 or I think we got through B1. And so I think we moved down to B2. Okay, so I'm looking for your reflections on expanding the considerations or adding some further information in the components of targets if it felt necessary. So you have the floor.
Okay, so I see Jill Hanna asking for the floor. Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of time, but I do notice that this one says all stakers have and are using standardized tools, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand how we would monitor that. So I think, again, it's one where the resource implications are huge. And I think we will need to be very targeted with indicators. And I think it's important to reflect. And I don't want to keep making the point, but maybe the co-chairs, I would certainly be very happy to entrust you with noting where these kind of phrases like all stakeholders come in, that there are big resource implications. Thank you. I won't say it again.
Thank you, Jill. I don't see, Michelle Sheeran, Switzerland. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Because there was some integration of targets, we would like to mention that we think that target B3, I know we're on B2, but B3 would have deserved to remain as a separate target as it previously was, but and this is, I mean, we mentioned in the previous intervention that we think that the accessibility of information is very crucial going beyond 2020 for the management of chemicals and waste. But we also see that B2 and B3 fit together in terms of topics. So it's okay for us to have this integration. We, however, think the notion of mechanisms to access information should be kept. And so this notion could be added to B2. This is because such mechanisms to access information will become more and more important in the future in view of handling of the many marketed chemicals and related information and questions. And so we think that this would deserve to be visible in the target. And we also think in terms of monitoring that this is something that can be, that you can actually monitor if you have mechanisms such as eChem portals or others, and you can also check if the information with such mechanisms is growing and how it is being accessed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I don't see other hands up.
Okay, so thank you for your comments, and we'll expand the considerations under this target. The next, please. So now I open the floor for your comments on this one, please.
Okay, so we have Laura from the USA, followed by Jill from GAP. Go ahead, Laura.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but this target seems, the new target seems incomplete here. We support the first formulation above for B3 with the addition of environmental, but we also could see combining this target with B2 as Switzerland mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Go ahead, Jill.
Like the US, we think this is a new target. We would give it very strong support. We don't think we have used the burden of disease data that is available and that is coming. It's a co-work these days of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation in the Gates funded institute in Seattle, works with the WHO. And burden of disease data is getting better all the time. Costs of inaction is also an important idea. But it does seem to be not fully formulated, this target. So I hope that before it's submitted, it could be turned into a sentence. I'm not sure how I would draft it, but maybe it's simply that these concepts are better used. I don't know.
Yeah, I can just explain why it is the way it is here. So we didn't have a specific formulation for this target, but the discussions made it clear that, at least from what we reviewed, that there was strong interest to have a target on this topic. So we didn't formulate an actual target, and the thought was just that we flag that there was quite a lot of support to having a target that covered burden of disease and cost of inaction, but did not propose a specific formulation for this target. That's why it is the way it appears.
Okay, so if we go back to our list, we've got Jacqueline Alvarez from UNEP. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Yes, thank you very much. And also, as others have said, thank you for the huge amount of work and the progress that this group has made. We have an observation regarding the new target B3, and we can't agree more the importance of burden of disease or cost of inaction. But for us, the concept of burden of disease or the concept of environmental burden, that it was also somehow put forward before higher up, and I think it was previously mentioned by UNEP several times, is the way to have an indication if we are progressing correctly with all the tools that we have, with the legislation that we put in place, with the risk assessments that we do for everything. So it's in a way factual manner to understand how we are working towards our vision, the burden of disease and the environmental burden. So for us, we agree with this concept, but maybe not to be placed under B. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Then we have Zuki from South Africa. Go ahead, Zuki. Go ahead, Zuki. We don't hear you, Zuki. Maybe we will try to address Zuki
later.
In a moment.
maybe some technical difficulties.
Yeah, let's pass the floor to Claudia first from UNECE, and then we'll go back to Zuki. We could unmute Claudia.
Thank you. I find this also a very interesting target. Yeah, I think it would also be interesting to look at the effects of, as I said before, I mean, chemical or industrial accidents and the prevention of such spills and leakages, and what effects they would actually have on the environment and on human health. And I also, I mean, I know this goes probably beyond what you had discussed, because you mentioned it at the beginning. You didn't discuss the definition of what waste is, but I mean, what comes to my mind immediately is also fatalities, for example, from industrial or chemical accidents, or people, that were harmed through that. And one thought that I have immediately is, what about this entire area of mine tailings accidents, tailings management facilities? But I do recognize that you said before you didn't discuss a discussion of waste. So thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Let's go back to Zuki for a moment. Let's see if we can connect Zuki, as I don't have other hands up. Please go ahead, Zuki. We don't hear you, Zuki.
Zuki has actually put in the comment also in the chat.
Great, okay.
So that the African region, we fully support the inclusion of the new target B3 on burden of disease and the cost of inaction. So that's, yeah. Sorry, Zuki, we can't hear you, but thanks for putting it in the chat.
It's clear, thanks. No other hands up for the moment, Sylvia Wahira.
Then,
okay, so we'll expand then the considerations as per the discussion, and then we can move on to the next one. So the same, I wait for your comments on expanding considerations or any comments you want to make on the components.
I have Suki from Japan. Please go ahead, Suki.
Thank you. We would like to add the word "the benefit of chemical" in this text. Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, Suki. I don't see other hands.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I see Olga. Please go ahead, Olga.
Sorry. So again, in our submission, we suggested to include gender responsive here, gender responsive educational training, and the others. I mean, the rest of the text.
Thank you, Olga. There are no other hands up.
Okay, thank you. We move to the next one. Okay, and here were two new targets that were generally discussed and accepted, we felt, through the group recordings that we listened to and the written submissions that we looked at in our meeting notes that we took.
There is one hand up, Laura Nazef, USA.
Thank you. For the new target B5, we agree with this target, although we think that the term circular economy is not used by all countries, so we think the reference to life cycle is sufficient here. And also we're unaware of any definition of what a clean circular economy would be. So we just wanted to note that. And then on the target BXX, as we've stated before, we don't support the inclusion in a voluntary instrument of an expectation to implement specific legal requirements. So we think that this could be considered, something related to GHS could be considered as an indicator, as noted under target above. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next comment is from Anastasia Swearinger, ICCA.
Hi, Brenda. Thank you. We just wanted to make the brief comment that on the new target B5, we'd like to, as I think Japan noted in the broader considerations, a note on the protection of confidential business information. And then on the new target BXX, we support the inclusion of this either as a target or it may be more appropriate as an indicator, but we certainly support this as included under the new framework.
Thank you. Next we have Matthias Wolf, EU. Go ahead, Matthias.
EU and member states support both of the proposals because, yeah, we made them. Just to react on that, what the US said, it's important, we think, to somehow mention in target B5 reuse and recycling and in this regard the circular economy, as well as the fact that when reusing or when recycling materials, it is important to phase out hazardous substances as far as possible. And so also the clean should be considered somehow in that target. And with regard to BXX, the GHS, we believe that it's still important to highlight its implementation in a target and also to highlight the fact that there is some legal measures needed at national level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Next, we have Matheus Bastos from Brazil.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate the proposal presented in target B5, but we would like to reiterate our concerns regarding the term circular economy. As one of the previous speakers just mentioned, there's no multilateral agreement on this term, on the definition of a circular economy. And indeed, this term is only used when in the existing approaches aimed at promoting more sustainable patterns of production and consumption. So that's why we endorse a wider concept of sustainable consumption and production, which is in line with the Rio +20 outcome document, The Future We Want, as well as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matheus. Michel Sheeran from Switzerland, so go ahead.
Thank you. We want to thank the EU for those two proposals, and we support those two proposals. Thank you.
I don't see anyone else asking for the floor. Please, Sylvia Wahira.
Okay, well, we'll expand the considerations as per the discussions now. I mean, these need consideration, so we'll include the discussion topics that we have heard. So next, please. Okay, so here we have the C, which in general, I think we have a comment under the C targets that they need to be linked with the discussions under the virtual working group 3 on issues of concern. So what we did was there were a lot of issues that people had with the current formulations. So we recognize that there needs to be further work on this. And so, I mean, the approach could be either to leave them all, but we chose to strike them for now, with the considerations that this needs further work and it has to be linked with the discussions from virtual working group 3, and that this needs a lot of work in relation also to the particular strategic objective under which it stands. So the floor is open for your comments.
Thank you, Sylvia. First comment, Jill Hanna from GAP. Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you very much. I think it's right GAP thinks it's right to take out the previous ones. Our concern with this new target C is that it would it would seem that it will be the targets and indicators included in Group C, and they will then be set in stone, which means your issues of concern are sort of frozen at a moment in time. Our approach here would be that what needs to be in a target is that there is an agreed and sensible way of prioritizing issues of concern, and that each individual issue of concern would indeed generate its own targets, but we don't have a target for process that is a prioritization process. And we would like to see a target that says something like issues of concern are chosen according to the harm they do to the environment and human health, so that there is an objective set of reasons for why you go into particular issues of concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. We now have Audun from Norway, followed by Matthias Wolf. Go ahead, Audun.
Thank you. We would be in favor of the new target C, so that targets and indicators for each individual issue of concern are managed within this issue of concern work plan, and then we can incorporate these with reference under the target C or under strategic objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Matthias, you now have the floor. Go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah, EU and member states agree with the deletion of C1 and C2, and we support the intention of the new target C, but we would seek more further clarification on what is exactly meant by are incorporated by reference. And finally, we made a proposal for another C target, what we think would complement the proposal made here. So it would be great if that could be considered, but it's already listed in the annex. And so far, we are fine with the paper as it is right now. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthias. Next, we have Kay Williams. Please go ahead, Kay.
Thank you very much. Like the EU, we will support deletion of the current targets under C. For the new target C, I think, again, we have much sympathy with what it is trying to achieve. We do have concerns that we do have a number of issues of concern already existing that may be carried over in addition to new ones. I think there are at least 8 issues of concern. And so that if we were to do new targets for each one, then we would have a lot of targets to be aiming for and measuring, and that is of concern to us as the UK in terms of practicality. Hence, we also then support GAP's point in relation to prioritisation. So, in summary, we are supportive of new target C, but are not quite sure how it would work, and we'd like to have further deliberations about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. I don't see other hands up.
Okay, we'll expand the considerations here based on the discussions, and we can move on then to D. And here we have the proposal that we selected from our exercise, and we open the floor now for your thoughts.
First one is Laura from the US. Please go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. We support the inclusion of this target, although not the high resource efficiency at the end. We do support resource efficiency and the life cycle approach, although this goes beyond the scope of chemicals issues, so we don't think it should be included. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brenda?
Yeah, I don't see other hands up. Thank you, Laura.
Okay.
Anastasia, actually, from ICCA. Please go ahead, Anastasia.
Hi, I just wanted to note that ICCA supports the inclusion of this target. I think this is a good example of where the feedback loop between the indicators and the targets will be really helpful to try and figure out how we might measure this target, and it might need some adjustment in the wording, but we support it as it's written now.
Thanks, Anastasia. I don't see other hands up then.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's move to the we'll take into account what the US noted before we distribute this. Next one then, please. So now I'll be taking comments on both D2 and D3. So I think if I remember, the reuse and recycling was just a reversal of the order that was suggested, and under D2 there was the thought that the global, regional, sub-regional, national could be addressed under the indicators. And so those are, I think, the changes that we made. The rest is in the consideration. So I open the floor for your comments.
Brenda, can you see any hands?
Yeah, no hands. I think people agree with these targets.
Okay.
Oh,
No ladies' hands.
Oh, I see Laura Nazef from the US. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. Just on this on target D2, we don't think that the last phrase about facilitating reuse and recycling should be included, again, because it's out of the scope of chemicals. We did think it was important to refer to sustainable procurement, but that could be done within an indicator. So if that could be noted, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. Next is Suki from, oh, go ahead, Sylvia, sorry. Okay, sorry, Suki from Japan, followed by Matthias. Go ahead, Suki.
Thank you. So the company can be written as a private sector so that the industry associations such as ICCA could be included. And also the investment sector should not be given the extra light on this text, and such the specific sectors could be included in indicators. Thank you. Oh, also.
Thank you, Suki. Over to Matthias Wolf. Go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah, we're quite fine for the time being with the proposals for the D targets, and just want to remind all of us that our mandate for the intersessional process says to react on the 2030 agenda. And in this regard, of course, we are kind of obliged to choose a holistic approach, and that also means that we have to think about reusing and recycling products and materials and so on, which is a quite chemicals related question. And so far we are very supportive of keeping things like reusing, recycling, circular economy, resource efficiency in the targets. And with regard to target D3, we really support the explicit mentioning of the investment sector, as this is a sector very important for transformation, really deciding upon and not yet mentioned in under SciChem or under the new framework. And so far we are very supportive of mentioning it in targets. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Suki, would you like the floor? Suki from Japan, I think we cut you off earlier.
Sorry, we just wanted a clarification on internationally recognized reporting standard, but it was written, so it's okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. And then we go to Zuki from South Africa. Please go ahead, Zuki. We don't hear you, Zuki. Suki, why don't we, maybe you could drop your note in the chat for now. And seems there's a bit of a technical glitch. And we can try to reconnect you later if that works. Meanwhile, I don't see any other hands up.
Okay, Brenda, shall we move forward?
Yeah, so thank you. So we'll expand on the considerations as noted and move on to the next one then, please. Next slide. Here we have D5 and new target DXX, where I invite your comments and any way you would like to expand on the considerations.
So we have Laura Nazif from the US. Go ahead, Laura.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick note on D5 that we would want to suggest deleting consumer products again, as that would be outside of the scope of chemicals. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next is Suki from Japan. Go ahead, Suki.
We support Laura's intervention, and also we would not want to limit I'm talking about the target D5. We don't understand why it's only industry association and life cycle management of chemical cannot be achieved without involvement of consumer organization, NGO, and others. So maybe we can write as non-governmental stakeholders. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Suki. Next is Michelle Sheeran. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. With regard to the new D target presented, we think that the ongoing identification of harmful substances in products and mixtures is necessary to be able to develop alternatives. It is therefore crucial in research and innovation programs, but it seems to be missing here in this target and should be added. So it's not to replace the development of alternatives in this target, but also mention the ongoing identification of harmful substances also in this target. That would be our comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Andrea Rother, please, University of Cape Town. Go ahead, Andrea.
Thank you, Brenda. I would like to suggest in target D5, there was the suggestion by the US to remove consumer products. I think for clarification, particularly for low and middle income countries, it would be helpful to say, and the safe management of chemicals, waste, and chemicals in products. There is definitely a problematic situation in terms of regulating chemicals versus chemicals and products in low and middle income countries. So I think it's important to keep that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Next is Matthias Wolf from the EU. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, in the EU and member states, we agree with what Andrea said with regard to consumer products. Maybe she can discuss the wording, but it's necessary, we think, that SAICM and its successor instrument will really avoid any gaps with regard to chemicals and waste. And so also the final products used by consumers should be considered and mentioned. Maybe another point that needs further discussion with regard to D5 is the responsibilities here, industry associations, but just to keep in mind for the further discussion, the same or similar things apply to DXX. Also, there are further discussions needed, but at a later stage. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up.
Okay, so here we'll have to expand the considerations definitely under the D5. I don't think that we have time to resolve the issues of whether and how to include consumer products or chemicals in products. So we're going to reflect that in the considerations, that there is a discussion and that there needs to be further discussion when elaborating this target further on this topic. Okay, so let's move to the next, please.
Sure. And in the meantime, Sylvia, I wanted to point out that Zuki's made her comment in the chat that she wasn't able to make earlier. So just so you're aware of that.
Okay, thank you very much, Zuki, and I invite others also to look at it because it's part of our work is also the chat. So it's important that we all kind of look at what colleagues are saying. Okay, so we move now to the E target. So those of you who have suspected, I will let you know we are continuing until we finish this. There's not much left, so I don't think we need any more than 15 minutes if we're economical and efficient in our time. So E1 and E2, please. I'm waiting for your feedback on these two in particular. If you would like to add to the considerations or the components or make other comments to these two targets.
Any hands, Brenda?
Yes, just seeing Suki from Japan. Please go ahead, Suki.
Thank you. We made this comment before, but all countries include the stakeholder organization, I guess. So it's either all countries or government and non-governmental stakeholders, like either way. And for target E2, we don't believe we need to include sub-regional because it's included within regional. Thank you.
Thanks, Suki. I don't see any other comments. Oh, I see Abbas from Iran. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding target E2, we think that in this target, taking into account the national consideration is very important because the level of development in the country is different, and also for some management of chemicals and waste in developing countries, some requirements should be prepared, including financial resources and technical capacity. So we think referring to national considerations in the consideration section is very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abbas. Okay, I don't see other hands.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll capture that in the considerations. Next, please. Next slide. The same approach here. So I open the floor for your comments, ways you want to the considerations to be expanded, or any other comments you may have.
Okay, I see Laura from the US asking for the floor. Go ahead, Laura.
Yes, just a brief point on E4. We see here that that further discussion should be included related to the integrated approach to financing. We support including something related to that. And also we had noted previously that instead of saying resources needed to achieve, we would suggest saying resources needed to support the sound management of chemicals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Next is Matthias. Please go ahead, Matthias, followed by Jill.
Yes, thanks. We would, with regard to target E3, still like to better understand what is expected as an outcome from this target and how progress could be measured. With regard to target E4, we remain hesitant and still think that this should be further discussed only once it's clear what the outcome of the group working on financial considerations will be. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthias. Next is Jill Hanna.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask for clarification from the EU and the USA, if not now, but somehow. They could explain why target E4 was difficult, because perhaps it's because it needs to say the integrated approach to resources, because if we have the adequate, we all want sound management of chemicals and wastes, if that's our scope. And if the players are governments in all countries, so we're talking about domestic resources as well as international development support, and the industries themselves, which is the other leg of the integrated approach, then we ought to have, from all of those, the resources we need to get to the end we all want. So providing there's a reference to the integrated approach in there, this is not simply a demand for aid, and I think it should be acceptable to all. So it would be good to have it clarified if the problem is that people are regarding it as a support demand for lots of additional development aid, because I don't think that's what it means. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Next is Terry. Please go ahead, Terry.
Can I hear? Thank you, Brenda. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I just want to ask for clarification between target E3 and alt E3. Does it mean that there are two different targets, or E3 could be replaced by alt E3, or just to want to know the intention of these two E3 and alt E3, the relation. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can just explain if I remember. No, joking. No, so basically during the discussions, when we were looking at the notes and we were looking over the recordings, we didn't see that there was very, very clear that one or the other would be better. So we ended up keeping both because it wasn't yet clear to us, at least from the discussions, what would be the decision. And that's why we would like to err on the side of caution and keep both of these here. And that's why we have included also the considerations when the process moves forward.
Okay. So I don't see any other hands at the moment. I do see a comment by Zuki. Maybe I'll read it out if that's okay, because she's having some difficulties. So for E4, this is from Zuki from South Africa, I think representing the Africa region. It's not possible to speak of or write about the life cycle management without the waste component of the life cycle. We thus need the brackets lifted off the around waste. We cannot utilize chemicals as a resource and then dump them once used, expecting someone else to deal with the resultant waste. Even when we discussed the integrated approach, we included waste.
Thank you very much, Suki. Okay, then we'll move to the next slide, please. We just have a couple more, so bear with us, please. So here we have this particular target. We had quite extensive discussions on this and the difficulties in formulation of this target. It's clear that this is an issue that needs to be further discussed and needs to be looked at in reflection upon possible indicators and ways to fix baselines and measure this progress. So we did have a lot of discussions about problems with this target and challenges with this target, but there was no clear kind of solution that came out from our discussions, and from our side also, we could not, in the time we had, find a good suggestion to propose. So that's why this consideration text is here. So comments from the floor, please.
Okay, so I see Matthias. Please go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah, we completely support the intention, but find that target very broad, and perhaps it would be better to place it somewhere else in the text or in the high-level declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Laura, please go ahead, USA.
Thank you. We had noted previously the difficulty of defining and measuring gaps. And so we just think that this target and E4 should just be bracketed pending the outcome of the virtual working group 4 and related follow-on discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Matheus from Brazil. Please go ahead, Matheus.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate the proposal of this target as it represents the core topic in terms of the implementation of the future of SciChem. But we would just like to make a suggestion in terms of the writing. It is not quite clear to us, so we would like to suggest the inclusions of gaps between developed and developing countries in the implementation or for the implementation of the sound management of chemicals in order to make the wording in the language more clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Matheus. Next, I have Andrea Rother, UCT. Go ahead, Andrea.
Thank you, Brenda. I agree with the comments that have been made, and also this issue of gaps, that gaps could be further defined, both in terms of Brazil's suggestion, but also taking into account the issue of double standards in countries. But I want to make a more general comment that if you're going to use the terminology of developed and developing countries, to please change it so that it's correct with the World Bank terminology. We're no longer using in many scientific publications these terminologies. Also, some of it is a bit derogatory. So I would ask that you use high income for developed and low and middle income countries for developing. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea. Next is Jill Hanna from the Global Alliance. Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you. GAP would agree with Brazil that this is actually what the whole of SciChem was about. And in some form, this should in fact be the vision and not necessarily just a target. Because the whole reason that we ever embarked on the SciChem process was indeed to narrow the gap. The question of language about how you refer to developed and developing countries is a very political one. And I think it depends which formulations the developing countries would prefer. In my experience in the UN, at least, they prefer this. But that's a matter for developing countries. What could be a useful indicator here is to be looking at the catch up on the basics like GHS. Because otherwise this is such a sprawling target, it's going to be extremely difficult to measure. So, as I say, in one level it ought to be put up to the level of the vision or the overall objective or something like that. And then it needs to be measured in a few really key indicators. And I think it would be good to say in your considerations, to take the argument you make in the considerations a bit further and say that something about, you know, the indicators will be actually crucial here. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Next is Abbas from Iran. Please go ahead, Abbas.
Thank you. We think that this target is very important for achieving the goals and objectives of the SciChem, as previous speakers referred to. So we insist on keeping this target in this case. But regarding the language, we can have negotiation on that in face-to-face negotiation later on. But moving this target to high-level declaration or removing that note, this is not something that we can agree with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I have Matheus from Brazil, or did we? I'm just lost here. Matheus, go ahead. Okay, no. Next, I have Auden from Norway.
Thank you very much. We appreciate very much the target E5, and we see this as a key point of SciChem. We recognize that gaps may be difficult to measure, but we think we should explore this more in the development in the indicators. So we should give more thought to that and try to find a way to measure gaps, as this is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Auden. Go ahead, Olga, please.
Thank you very much. So we would like to just remind everyone that SciCom 2.0 or the strategy beyond 2020 is a timeless strategy. So by narrowing the gap, everyone agrees that it will remain forever. So we believe that the word narrowed should be substituted by the word eliminated. And also we agree that this target should be accompanied by very concrete indicators. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Olga. I don't see anyone else asking for the floor.
Okay, thank you. So we'll expand on the considerations here, and we can move on to the next slide. And these are so this is the last slide then that we have for us to reflect upon for the targets. And these are two new targets that were proposed and discussed during our deliberations. So again, I'm asking for your comments on expanding on the considerations or components.
Great. I have Victoria from Canada asking for the floor. Please go ahead, Victoria.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, so I was just looking at target EXX, and we noticed that the universal health coverage and primary health care has been removed from the end of that sentence. And I understand there was some discussion of this when it was proposed, but I haven't seen any really strong opposition to its inclusion. So I'm just curious why it has been removed here. And I mean, for us, it's very important from a health sector perspective. And so we think that it should remain, I guess, is the final point.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can leave it. I think from reviewing the recordings, it seemed like there was quite strong opposition to part of this, but if there are no objections, of course, we can leave it.
Thank you, Victoria. I just note there's another comment from Zuki about multinational companies in the chat. I think it relates to the last target. And I see that Anastasia has written there that they support Zuki's comment. So I think that that's good progress, that we'll take note of what was said there in the chat. Then followed by Matthias Wolf from the EU and member states.
Thanks. Yeah, we are quite fine with the intention of target EXX, but like the previous speaker said, we think the wording or the scope and the sectors mentioned here, that should be or needs further thinking through. In this regard, we would like to reference to the integrated approach that already mentions more sectors where we need synergies, or where are synergies and where we need further linkages. With regard to UIY, we see that as a reminder and really appreciate it. because we think a target with regard to internalization of costs and, of course, recovery mechanisms would be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Next, we have Laura Nazef, USA.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to make a note regarding in the reflections document, it says the group generally expressed support for the introduction of the following new targets for inclusion. Perhaps this could be clarified to something such as the group expressed support for further discussion on these targets, or further discussion is needed. So it doesn't seem like there's agreement on these new targets. Thank you.
Good point, Laura. We'll make that change. Thanks. That's a good point.
Okay, next is Audun from Norway. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding target EXX, we think that the idea of this target is good, but this is an example of a target that is maybe not fully smart. And it's difficult to measure, and it's difficult to assess whether you have reached your target or not. So it should be made more specific and more measurable. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Audun. I don't see other hands up.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. So I know this was not an easy task, but I think the extra 20 minutes that we had were useful, because I think there was strong support for kind of moving this kind of document, outcome document further, and we will expand upon the considerations as have been discussed, and create then the outcome document that will consist of two parts, as we discussed. It would be the part part two, but which we discussed first, that is related to the second part of our mandate on recommendations on further work, where we'll be outlining then these two options, option 1 and option 2. And then the first part of our mandate as relates to the work that we've been looking at right now on the targets. So we will be, very carefully looking over and listening to what the comments you've made and the comments that are in the text, and expand the considerations in this document so that it reflects our discussion today and the comments. So I would like to say, on behalf of Wahida and I, we greatly appreciate the support and dedication to this virtual working group process. We understand it has taken up a lot of your time, both from your families and from work and other tasks that you have. And we appreciate, both the time and effort you've put in the written submissions, as well as the participation in the virtual meetings, which I know for me is not so much of a challenge, but I know Wahida is already in the late evening, and it's quite difficult. Yeah. So we do appreciate all of that, and we do understand the constraints. And as I mentioned earlier this afternoon, we did try to find convergence of the views based on the written submissions. And of course, it was a challenging task, and we as co-facilitators tried our best to see where a convergence was possible, and discuss through the virtual meetings we had. And we appreciate the time you've taken, both in looking over these written this written kind of reflections document, and also the proposal that we posted last week, and that you've dedicated your time to really go over them, and to in our discussions expand on the considerations, so that we can have a document that we can move forward. I'd like to stress that this is not agreed text, as we've said many times. It is a presentation of as much as we can, a reflection of the discussions that we have had, and we will be presenting, and it will be presented in this manner to the Bureau, and as a views of the virtual working group that had convergence. So thank you very much for your time, for your dedication, and we Look forward, of course, as you, I'm sure, to hear from the Bureau on what the decisions will be to move forward. We look forward also to hearing from the other virtual groups about the outcomes of their discussions and deliberations, which are, as you know, at the same state as ours. They are not dealing in specific text because we're not in negotiations. So this will be this has been a challenge, and it will be a challenge across the board in how to reflect the discussions in each group. So thank you very much. Sorry for going a bit over time. I wish you all the best evening, a day, or a nice sleep and good dreams if you're going straight to bed after this. And then we look forward to you having a look at the outcome document, and hopefully we'll be proud of the common work and the common output that we've reached. So thank you very much, and good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda, Sylvia, thank you so much. Good effort, great work, and good outcome. Great.
You must be tired, Wahida.
Thank you. It's dinner time for me. Have good lunch for you.
Only? I would think it's midnight. Midnight.
No, it's 9 o'clock. It's perfect.
Oh, okay. It's not that bad.
Not that bad, because I enjoy, because after my work, I finish my work and come for this. So this is perfectly all right. So I enjoy. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Sylvia. See you soon.
Okay.
Have a good day. Take care. Bye.